وتعزيز الشفافية والمحاسبة. ونضم صوتنا لما جاء في تقرير الأمين العام حول ضرورة التوصل إلى وضع برنامج قطري لصندوق النقد الدولي، كون غيابه يؤثر سلباً على المشاريع والبرامج والتقديمات. من ناحية أخرى، لابد من مواكبة الجهود في الداخل بمزيد من الحوار والتعاون على الصعيد الإقليمي، لأن الدول المجاورة لأفغانستان باستطاعتها لا بل من مصلحتها تعزيز الروابط الاقتصادية معها والمساهمة بتحصين الوضع الأمني فيها من خلال ضبط الحدود ومكافحة المخدرات والإرهاب والجريمة المنظمة عبر الوطنية. وفي الختام، نجدد تقديرنا لجهود المجتمع الدولي بشكل عام ولجهود الأمم المتحدة بمختلف هيئاتها بشكل خاص، فهي تعمل بشجاعة وعزم في ظروف بالغة الصعوبة من أجل بناء مقومات الدولة الأفغانية القادرة على حماية شعبها ومؤسساتها وعلى إعادة الحياة والازدهار للرجال والنساء والأطفال الأفغان. وشكراً السيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Lebanon for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of India.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to congratulate you on the assumption of presidency of the Security Council and also commend the Gabonese PR and his team for steering the work of the Council in the month of June. I would like also to thank you, Mr. President, for scheduling today's debate on the situation in Afghanistan. I also thank Ambassador Zahid Tanin, Permanent Representative of Afghanistan, for his statement. We are grateful for the latest report of the Secretary General and are appreciative of the briefing by the SRSG, Mr. Demistura. Mr. President, Afghanistan is amidst the beginning of a phase of implementation of the transition where the Afghan National Security Forces would start assuming the security responsibility in 7 key areas, including Kabul. This is a critical phase for Afghanistan as well as the international community. We are deeply concerned that the challenges confronting Afghanistan, particularly on the security front, do not appear to be receding. On the contrary, the overall security environment continues to deteriorate. The Secretary General's report notes that there has been a 51% increase in security incidents as compared to the same period in 2010, characterized by a significant increase in suicide attacks, abductions, and assassinations. The terrorist attacks on the Unama compound in Mazar-e-Sharif and the government buildings in Kandahar, the coordinated suicide attack at the highly secured Intercontinental Hotel in Kabul and on a hospital in Logar corroborate the change in tactics wherein the Taliban and other opposition groups are opting for soft civilian targets. As pointed out in our statement on this subject on 17th March, these attacks point to a dangerous osmosis of ideologies, ambitions, training, and operations among the syndicate of terrorism in the region, with suicide terrorism as its main technique, and targets not limited to Afghanistan. This, the international community, in its hurry to withdraw from a combat role in Afghanistan, will ignore at its own peril. It therefore becomes crucial that the transition must be linked to the ground realities rather than a rigid timetable. A constant assessment and review of the evolving situation in coordination with the Afghan government is essential in this regard. We appreciate the enhanced collaboration among the International Security Assistance Force and Afghan National Security Forces. Building the requisite strength and capabilities of Afghan National Security Forces along with the adequate enablers is imperative to the transition of security responsibilities. It is important that the transition must be Afghan-owned, transition must be planned and implemented in a systematic manner, and transition must ensure the protection and promotion of human rights of all Afghans. For security and stabilization of Afghanistan, it is important to isolate and root out the syndicate of terrorism, which include elements of the Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Lashkar-e-Toiba, and other terrorist and extremist groups operating from within and outside Afghanistan's borders. These groups are ideologically and operationally fused, and their bonds have strengthened over the years. As the Secretary General's report points out, the insurgency in Afghanistan remains resilient, demonstrating capability to launch multiple complex attacks. The continued resilience of the insurgents, their changing tactics, their numbers, and their spreading out to areas earlier considered safe are a grim reminder that the security gains would remain transient unless the international community is able to firmly deal with safe havens for terrorist groups outside Afghanistan's borders. Mr. President, India fully supports an Afghan-led inclusive and transparent process of reconciliation, adhering to the red lines as enunciated by the Afghan government in the Kabul and London communiques. It must be accompanied by an inclusive political process and intra-Afghan dialogue. It is important that the antecedents of those willing to reintegrate must be ascertained, and it needs to be ensured that they are genuine reconcilees. We support the views and decisions of the government and people of Afghanistan as they seek to build a more secure, stable, and prosperous future and a strong democracy in their country. The Afghan people must be allowed to rebuild their land in conditions of peace and security, free from interference from their neighbors, and they must be the arbitrators of their own destiny. It is our expectation that the new sanctions regime established pursuant to Security Council Resolution 1988 would enable the Afghan government to have a greater say in confronting the challenges from those constituting a threat to peace, security, and stability of Afghanistan. Afghan ownership and leadership are vital for development and reconstruction in Afghanistan. This also implies greater coherence, coordination, and further streamlining of international communities' development efforts, including aligning of assistance with Afghan national priorities and increasingly working through Afghan institutions. We are happy to note that UNAMA continues to align its priorities with the Afghan government. Mr. President, India and Afghanistan share a strategic partnership based on the strong foundations of rich historical and civilizational bonds and shared pursuit of regional peace and prosperity. India remains committed to partnering the government and people of Afghanistan in the building of a peaceful, stable, democratic, and pluralist nation. India's assistance program is spread across Afghanistan and spans almost the entire gamut of economic and social development activities. Assisting Afghanistan in its reconstruction efforts in capacity building and skills for human resource development and building Afghanistan's public institutions are special priority areas for India. As mentioned by Ambassador Tanin in his statement, during his last visit to Afghanistan on May 12-13, 2011, our Prime Minister announced an additional assistance of $500 million over and above India's existing commitments of $1.5 billion. Afghanistan's stability and economic development depend a lot on its neighbors and the region as a whole. Closer economic integration with India and other countries in the region is the key to Afghanistan's future prosperity. The area of Afghanistan south of the Hindu Kush, all the way up to the Ganges Delta, form a part of a single geographical and economic basin, with the plains of India constituting the center of its economic gravity. It is by far Afghanistan's largest regional market, a potential source of investment, skills, training, technology, and expertise, and a model of democracy and natural institution building in a culturally comfortable context. Afghanistan has an immense potential as a land bridge linking Central, West, and South Asia and emerging as a trade, transport, and energy hub. The recent developments in the regional cooperation, including the signing of the agreement on Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline project, would provide added impetus to regional cooperation. Growing economic interdependence would catalyze peace and prosperity in the region at large and in Afghanistan in particular. Afghanistan, as a SAARC member since 2005, is increasingly becoming active as a fellow SAARC member. India, as a neighbor, will continue its efforts towards the greater integration of Afghanistan in the regional framework. In conclusion, Mr. President, we commend the good work done by UNAMA, and we think that at this critical juncture, it is imperative that the international community continues to remain steadfast in its support to the government of Afghanistan as per its priorities. Thank you.
I thank the representative of India for his statement, and I give now the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vous félicite naturellement de votre accession à la présidence du Conseil de sécurité et je remercie également le Gabon pour la manière dont il a assuré la présidence au cours du mois de juin. Je remercie Monsieur de Mistura pour l'exposé qu'il vient de faire sur la situation en Afghanistan et je m'associe à la déclaration que fera le représentant de l'Union européenne. Je remercie également l'ambassadeur Tanin pour son intervention. Permettez-moi, Monsieur le Président, de commencer par rendre hommage à tous les agents des Nations Unies engagés en Afghanistan. Le Conseil de sécurité a réagi au lendemain de l'attaque lancée le 1er avril contre les locaux de la MANUA à Mazar-i-Sharif, attaque d'autant plus révoltante que les hommes et les femmes assassinés travaillaient pour la stabilisation, la sécurité et le développement de l'Afghanistan. Cette attaque ne doit pas nous faire dévier de notre objectif qui est d'accompagner le gouvernement afghan dans le chemin du retour à sa pleine souveraineté. À cet égard, le processus de transition est désormais lancé. Cette nouvelle phase de notre engagement conduit, à partir de cette année, au transfert progressif et ordonné des responsabilités de sécurité aux autorités afghanes. La France restera engagée avec ses alliés aux côtés du peuple afghan pour mener le processus de transition à son terme prévu, fin 2014, que ce soit dans notre zone de déploiement ou en matière de formation des forces de sécurité afghanes. Notre engagement en Afghanistan, qui s'inscrit dans la durée, évoluera pour tenir compte du contexte nouveau de la transition. Le redéploiement prévu des troupes françaises se fera en étroite concertation avec nos alliés et avec les autorités afghanes. Mais nous devons être attentifs à ce que le processus de transition conduise également à une prise en charge par le gouvernement afghan de responsabilités en matière de gouvernance et de développement. Beaucoup reste à faire et le temps presse. Nous devons impliquer davantage les Afghans dans la planification et la mise en œuvre des projets de développement. De son côté, le gouvernement afghan doit combattre plus fermement la corruption et le népotisme, comme le rappelle la situation de la Kabul Bank. Des progrès doivent être également constatés dans le domaine de l'exécution budgétaire par une déconcentration de la dépense publique et un renforcement des capacités de planification et de conduite des projets de développement dans les provinces et dans les districts. Monsieur le Président, sur le front de la sécurité, nous avons repris l'initiative militaire et permis à l'État afghan de reprendre pied dans plusieurs zones. Son armée et sa police montent en puissance avec notre soutien en termes financiers, de formation, de tutorat, qui permet aux alliés d'envisager un retrait progressif de certaines forces de combat engagées en Afghanistan. Nos efforts militaires et de formation commencent à porter leurs fruits, mais au prix de combats très durs. Les gains militaires seront de courte durée s'ils ne s'inscrivent pas dans un contexte qui renforce la légitimité des autorités afghanes et qui permettent d'envisager une solution politique au conflit. Malheureusement, l'incertitude que fait peser un tribunal sur le pouvoir législatif nuit au bon fonctionnement des institutions démocratiques et les détourne des préoccupations réelles des électeurs afghans. Nous appelons donc toutes les institutions afghanes à travailler dans le respect de leurs compétences mutuelles, du cadre que fixe la Constitution et du principe de la séparation des pouvoirs. Le représentant spécial du secrétaire général doit rester saisi de cette question et de la réforme électorale dont ce pays a besoin. Nous avons en revanche noté le chemin parcouru sur la voie de la réconciliation inter-afghane. Nous continuons d'appuyer les efforts du président Karzai et l'action du Haut Conseil pour la paix pour développer un processus de paix associant l'ensemble des composantes de la société afghane. Ce processus doit être soutenu par un effort régional qui prenne en compte les intérêts de sécurité des voisins de l'Afghanistan contre le respect par ceux-ci de sa souveraineté. Les Nations unies peuvent, dans cette perspective, jouer un rôle utile. En séparant le régime de sanctions des Nations unies, frappant Al-Qaïda et les talibans, le Conseil de sécurité a pris une décision importante qui, nous l'espérons, incitera les Afghans à tourner le dos au terrorisme international, à engager un dialogue direct et à envisager leur avenir ensemble. Monsieur le Président, la France voudrait conclure en réaffirmant son plein soutien à l'action du représentant spécial du secrétaire général Staffan de Mistura. Le Conseil de sécurité a, par sa résolution 1974, renouvelé le mandat de la MANUA et confirmé que les priorités définies il y a 2 ans étaient les bonnes. Il a également demandé qu'une revue complète des activités de la MANUA et des Nations unies en Afghanistan soit réalisée d'ici la fin de l'année. Elle sera l'occasion de réfléchir à l'évolution de l'engagement des Nations unies dans ce pays. Cette revue devra se faire en totale transparence avec les autorités afghanes. Cet exercice, la conférence de Bonn II et le renouvellement du mandat de la MANUA en 2012 seront autant d'occasions de renouveler notre attachement à l'objectif commun de voir un Afghanistan démocratique, indépendant et prospère tourner définitivement le dos à la violence et à l'instabilité. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of France for a statement, and I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Germany. Let me join others to warmly welcome and thank the Special Representative for his briefing today, and we equally thank Ambassador Tanin for his statement. My government aligns itself with the EU statement to be delivered later on. I will touch upon 3 issues today. First, transition. Germany welcomes that the process of security transition is progressing in line with the improved quality and quantity of the Afghan security forces. My delegation particularly welcomes the beginning of security transition in the first tranche of 7 districts and municipalities to Afghan security responsibility this month. It is important to underline, as per the agreement between NATO and the Afghan government, that the transition period will continue to be gradual and condition-based. The number of security incidents in recent months illustrates clearly the magnitude of the challenges still ahead of us. We believe, however, that the strategy and timeliness agreed between Afghanistan and the international community will continue to serve us well, and we intend to stay the course. Germany condemns the ongoing violence, and particularly in the strongest terms, the latest attack on a hospital in Logar. We note with continued serious concern a further increase in civilian casualties, up to 90% of which are now caused by insurgents. We commend the professional reaction by the Afghan security forces during last week's heinous attack on the Intercontinental Hotel in Kabul. In this Council, I would like to particularly stress the UN's security. As all of us here today, Germany greatly appreciates the SRSG's and the UNAMA's colleagues' work under most challenging circumstances. But as we expect UNAMA to continue with their indispensable work, we have a common responsibility to do everything we can to protect UN staff and their operations. Mazar was another shocking experience for the UN community, and we extend our condolences to all the families of the victims. Germany calls for maximum efforts, including by the Afghan government, to protect international support operations in Afghanistan. My second point is on the Kabul process. Over time, the transition agenda described in the Kabul process will also change the nature of the international support. However, It is the strong expectation of the international community that UN resources and expertise are made use of to preserve the progress achieved and to build a sustainable partnership with a viable state based on Afghan leadership, democratic principles, and respect for human rights, reliable governmental and non-governmental institutions, and founded on a firm constitutional basis. One of the determining factors for the success of the Kabul process is a solution to the Kabul bank crisis. There's no substitute for credible financial institutions. Germany concurs with the report in that the absence of an IMF program seriously endangers the Kabul process and the ability to increasingly channel development support through the government budget. My third point, let me briefly touch upon preparations for the International Afghanistan Conference in Bonn in December, which some of you have mentioned, and which Germany looks forward to hosting, upon the request of the Afghan government. On the whole, the conference is about shifting of more weight onto the long-term and the political component within our common Afghanistan strategy. As was decided by President Karzai, the three main aims of the conference chaired by Afghanistan are to further define the civilian aspects of the transition process until 2014, to strongly confirm and define long-term international support for Afghanistan beyond 2014, and to contribute to the political process of reconciliation, including its regional dimension. We expect that the Bonn Conference will be an important milestone on the way to a stable Afghanistan at peace with itself and its neighbors. In this context, Germany considers the recent split of the 1267 sanctions regime into separate Al-Qaeda and Taliban regimes as an important stepping stone. Let me end by assuring continued and long-term German support to our Afghan friends and by underlining our appreciation of UNAMA's role and the wider UN support. Germany considers UNAMA and the UN system core partners for successful transition in the interest of all Afghans. I now resume my function as President of the Council. And I now give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Mr. President, I thank Special Representative de Mistura for his very comprehensive and informative briefing. I would also like to express my gratitude to all the men and women of UNAMA who have demonstrated a deep commitment to this very difficult mission. I also thank Ambassador Tanin for his statement. At the outset, I would like to express my deep regret for the attack on UNAMA on April 1st in Mazar Sharif. I offer my deepest condolences for those UN personnel who died and to their families. As Special Representative de Mistura stated at the last Council debate in March, this is a crucial year. It is a year of transition. Leading up to 2014, Japan is determined to continue to cooperate with UNAMA during this very important year and beyond. Mr. President, as stated in the recent SG report, the security situation in Afghanistan continues to be challenging. We are concerned about security risks as highlighted by the recent attack on the Intercontinental Hotel in Kabul. I express my deep condolences for the deceased. Security remains a priority that we have to tackle. Japan supports President Obama's announcement regarding U.S. policy on Afghanistan. Transition is scheduled to start in 7 areas during this month. It is indispensable for peace and security in Afghanistan to conduct smooth transition during the the drawdown of U.S. other international forces. The transition and sustainable security are interlinked with the political process and development. In this context, Japan continues to play its role in strengthening the Afghan security force through assistance to Afghan police, such as our continued funding of police salaries and efforts to enhance administrative capacity, both in central and provincial governments. Japan recently decided to support a program for literacy for empowering Afghan police, and this month will start to train Afghan National Police in cooperation with Turkey. Mr. President, there remain other concerns. The situation regarding the Kabul Bank is a serious issue, which affects international donors providing funds and the framework of international assistance as a whole. The disqualification by the Special Election Court of parliamentarians elected last year and previously confirmed by the Independent Election Commission has resulted in tensions between Parliament and the court, which may seriously affect the stability and reconstruction of Afghanistan. This comes at a critical time for maintaining solidarity in the country. We sincerely hope that Afghan government, parliament, and the courts act within their competence and address these issues properly and expeditiously. Mr. President, we welcome the successful review conference of the reintegration process held in Kabul on May 10th and 11th. Further progress in the reintegration process constitutes an important pillar of the political process. We highly appreciate the significant role played by UNAMA and the countries concerned in this process. Japan is determined to continue our contribution, such as the provision of $50 million to the Reintegration Fund for achieving irreversible progress in the Afghan-led reintegration program. In this context, the recent adoption of Council resolutions to split the Al-Qaeda and Taliban sanctions list was a positive step to promote reconciliation in the country. Further progress in the political process requires Afghan ownership with continued support of the international community. Mr. President, for long-term stability in Afghanistan, we have to accelerate regional cooperation among surrounding neighbors. Japan is ready to play an active role in the economic development of the broader area that can enable surrounding neighbors to pave the way for integrating Afghanistan into the regional and global economy. Mr. President, Japan, despite being affected by the March earthquake, is determined to implement our assistance to Afghanistan, which we committed in November 2009, considering the importance of the country, Afghanistan. While the drawdown of the military presence will soon begin, long-term engagement with Afghanistan is still very important. I would like to stress once again that the coordination between responsible Afghan ownership and support from the international community are now more necessary than ever in order to realize sustainable economy. This should be based on a mid to long-term perspective so that after the full transition to Afghan leadership, namely beyond 2014, Afghanistan can become self-reliant for its economic development. Mr. President, I believe that there is a solid commitment by the international community for the reconstruction of Afghanistan. We expect further progress during the Bonn conference this December. On the Afghan side, the country needs to strengthen its capacity for achieving real Afghan ownership and leadership as well. A comprehensive review of UNAMA's mandate and the UN support in Afghanistan, which is requested in Security Council Resolution 1974, will be a very important task of the UN for steering the future course of Afghanistan. UNAMA continues to play an important role, and Japan continues its utmost to contribute to its activities. In conclusion, we would like to express our sincere appreciation for the dedication of the Special Representative Secretary General of the Minister and reiterate our commitment to support UNAMA's efforts. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Japan, and I now give the floor to the representative of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. President. Afghanistan is entering into a pivotal period, and it's likely that its long-term transformation into a secure and stable democracy will be greatly influenced by events and decisions made in the near term. An improved security situation remains paramount to our efforts in Afghanistan. While counterinsurgency efforts have been successful in reversing insurgent momentum in southern Afghanistan, violence is increasing in areas which were previously considered secure. Security will need to improve significantly in order to provide the space needed for Afghanistan to grow and develop. All civilian deaths resulting from the violence are tragic, and we take every step possible to avoid civilian casualties due to ISAF operation. However, the overwhelming majority of these deaths are caused by the insurgency. Indeed, civilians are often the primary target of insurgents. This was tragically illustrated in the recent attack of the Intercontinental Hotel in Kabul and the recent use by the insurgents of an 8-year-old girl as a suicide bomber. We condemn these tactics of desperation which contravene international law and demand that they ceased. The government of Afghanistan and ISAF have recently begun the process of transitioning lead security responsibility from the international community to Afghan authorities. Canada, through the NATO training mission, is committed to increasing the number and improving the quality of personnel of the Afghan National Security Forces, who will be crucial to maintaining peace in the country. To this end, Canada will be providing up to 950 Canadian Forces personnel and up to 45 civilian police from 2011 to 2014 to help train the ANSF. We may be drawing down in Kandahar, but we remain committed to supporting Afghanistan. Monsieur le Président, il n'est pas possible d'instaurer la stabilité et la sécurité en Afghanistan exclusivement par des moyens militaires. Il faut un processus de réconciliation entre le gouvernement afghan et les insurgés. Pour qu'une réconciliation durable soit possible, il faudra que les insurgés renoncent à la violence, rompent leurs liens avec Al-Qaïda et reconnaissent la constitution afghane. Certes, il faut tenir des pourparlers de paix dès maintenant, nous en convenons. Mais il y a des Afghans qui redoutent sincèrement la perte des gains réalisés depuis 10 ans sur les plans de la démocratisation, des droits humains et de la provision des services essentiels. Il faut tenir compte de cette préoccupation dans les discussions en cours et veiller à ce que la paix profite à tous les citoyens afghans. Le Canada partage l'avis de nombreux Afghans et de nombreux membres de la communauté internationale. À long terme, il faudra un processus de guérison inclusif pour instaurer une paix et une stabilité durable en Afghanistan. Ce processus devra impliquer toutes les couches de la société afghane, y compris les femmes, dans des efforts à long terme visant à renouer les relations et à résoudre les doléances historiques qui risqueraient, faute de solution, de saper toute paix durable en Afghanistan. Monsieur le Président, le Canada, avec ses partenaires internationaux, collabore étroitement avec le gouvernement afghan pour que les aspects civils de la transition, le renforcement de la gouvernance et du développement soient coordonnés de manière à favoriser le succès et l'irréversibilité de la transition dans son ensemble. Le succès de la transition dépendra d'une action concertée et d'un engagement politique sérieux des dirigeants afghans en faveur d'une gouvernance inclusive et responsable. Il faut continuer d'aider et d'encourager le gouvernement afghan à se donner les moyens de fournir des services et d'ouvrir des débouchés aux Afghans. À cet égard, le processus de Kaboul et les plans de priorité nationale que dirige le gouvernement afghan demeurent des outils importants pour le gouvernement afghan et pour la communauté internationale. Il faut maintenant faciliter la mise en œuvre des plans de priorité nationale en les liant à la transition en matière de sécurité et en veillant à ce qu'ils apportent des bénéfices tangibles dans les domaines comme l'accès aux services de santé et l'éducation à la population afghane. Il est important que ces plans soient viables et réalistes sur le plan budgétaire. À cet égard, la communauté internationale devrait aider l'Afghanistan à augmenter sa capacité de produire des recettes durant cette période. Le secteur privé aussi a un rôle important à jouer dans le développement du pays. Il est aussi crucial que les Afghans puissent faire confiance à leurs élus pour représenter leurs intérêts au niveau des districts, des provinces et de l'ensemble du pays. La corruption mine la confiance dans les institutions démocratiques et les efforts accomplis pour stabiliser le pays. Il reste un problème sérieux qui pourrait être un obstacle majeur au succès de la transition dans les années à venir. Le gouvernement afghan doit donc prendre des mesures concrètes et visibles pour combattre la corruption et l'empêcher de faire dérailler le programme de transition. Mr. President, regional countries also have a significant role in Afghanistan's success or failure, as well as the overall stability of the South and Central Asia. It is crucial for Afghanistan and its neighbors to overcome the deep-seated historical distrust and conflicting interests that are often at odds with regional stability and economic logic. Political differences continue to block progress on what could be win-win initiatives on the economic front, which could contribute enormously to lasting stability and prosperity in the region. We look forward to the Afghan-led Bonn conference in December, which will focus on issues of importance to the transition process. There are several such conferences on Afghanistan scheduled for 2011, and while it is of absolute importance that we continue to have an important, open and candid dialogue, we need to muster real political will to see tangible progress. Mr. President, in the past 10 years, significant, quantifiable progress has been made in Afghanistan in key areas. We are all focused on the same goal, the transition of responsibilities for security, governance, and development to the government of Afghanistan. The Afghan government and the international community are united in their determination to meet this objective, and Canada will continue to play its active role. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Canada for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I congratulate you on the assumption of the presidency for the month of July, and thank you for convening today's debate. I would like to especially mention with appreciation the briefing by SRSG Stefan de Mistura. Pakistan always values the work of the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, which is so ably led by SRSG Mistura, and I hope the rumors of his not continuing are not true. The Secretary General's quarterly reports are an important barometer of political and security developments in Afghanistan. These reports provide useful indicators to gauge the progress and setbacks in our collective efforts for peace in Afghanistan. And I reiterate, gauge the progress and setbacks in our collective efforts. Firstly, the period marks the beginning of implementation of the transition towards greater Afghan leadership and ownership as envisaged in the Kabul process and as a point that Pakistan drives home in every meeting held in the Security Council. Secondly, it coincides with the start of comprehensive review of UNAMA's mandate as laid down in the Security Council Resolution 1974. We believe that the UNAMA's priorities in this period should continue to be defined along the lines of facilitation of, number one, national reconciliation, number two, supporting governance, and number three, promotion of socio-economic development in Afghanistan, which is perhaps the least so far to show an upward incline in its graph. Regarding the ongoing comprehensive review of the UNAMA mandate, which completes in the year 2011, I must emphasize that Afghan ownership and respect for the sovereignty of Afghanistan in all areas must be ensured. Greater harmonization of UNAMA's work with the goals of transition as well as coordination within UN bodies has to be essential ingredients of the new mandate. Is Afghanistan, Mr. President, hotting up as we arrive closer to hypotheticated withdrawal dates? Well, the Secretary General's report has documented, and I reiterate, 51% increase in security-related incidents in Afghanistan during the reporting period. The report rightly expresses concern at the human cost of the conflict, characterized by a steady rise in civilian casualties resulting not only from insurgency, but also military operations. Allow me to concede that the security challenges in Afghanistan are complicated by 3 decades of war, capacity of Afghan security forces, presence of foreign forces, and the exploitation of socio-political complexity by criminals and drug traffickers. But the problem of security in Afghanistan does not lend itself to mere facile explanations, exemplified by externalization and a self-defeating blame game. Violence and instability, both in Afghanistan and Pakistan, is a threat. Therefore, we are extending all possible cooperation to Afghanistan in the fields of security and intelligence. A viable mechanism of such cooperation is the Tripartite Commission, which includes the United States and the International Security Assistance Forces, ISAF, which meets regularly. The number of our military and paramilitary personnel deployed along the border with Afghanistan is more than all international troops present inside the whole of Afghanistan. Pakistan's commitment to peace in Afghanistan is unwavering. The cause of regional and international peace will not be served if Afghanistan is to become a theater of proxy wars or its land use for extraterritorial subversive activity. Mr. President, long-time solution to security challenges in Afghanistan lies in a workable reconciliation and reintegration process. And Afghanistan at peace will itself can best ensure its own security. The Secretary General's report and SRSG's briefings have rightly pointed out linkages between reconciliation and security. Pakistan supports an Afghan-led and inclusive reconciliation process with a view to bringing the opposition groups into the political mainstream. We believe that engagement of the Organization of Islamic Conference and UNAMA with the reconciliation process is going to be helpful. We emphasize the need to ensure that the newly created Afghanistan-specific Sanctions Committee contributes effectively to curb the insurgency, and the results promote reconciliation in Afghanistan, and this must be seen to happen. We hope that UNAMA's cooperation with the Security Council Sanctions Committee on Afghanistan will go a long way to add professional and political input for listing and delisting. Pakistan will continue to assist the Afghan-led reconciliation process, including through the Afghanistan-Pakistan Joint Commission for Reconciliation and Peace in Afghanistan. The first meeting of the Joint Commission was held in Islamabad last month on the eve of the visit of President Hamid Karzai. Both our countries have affirmed the resolve to work closely for lasting reconciliation and peace in Afghanistan. As a follow-up of the Islamabad meeting, the first working-level meeting of the Joint Commission has also been held last week in Kabul. It has been decided to set up specialized working groups to move forward in a responsible and sure-footed manner. And make no mistake, this process is very active and shall produce beneficial results. Our quest for peace and stability in Afghanistan is dovetailing into a long-term cooperative partnership. And today's Washington Post headlines of hundreds of militants crossing over from Afghanistan to attack Pakistani border village, so-and-so killed, will not deter us from this process. And my advice to my friend is all peace processes normally come to the point where this sort of activity takes place through militants who would like to prove otherwise the peace process. We will not succumb to it. Despite the utmost efforts of these militants crossing over to create havoc and derail the process, let me reaffirm we will not let that happen. The Islamabad Declaration signed during the visit of President Karzai in Pakistan last month documents the contours of this partnership in areas of trade and economy, transport, connectivity, project cooperation in infrastructure, energy, minerals, as well as enhancing paramilitary exchange and people-to-people contact. International assistance in these areas, especially corporate sector engagement, can catalyze rich dividends for peace and prosperity in the region. Mr. President, the Secretary General's report has noted that just over 19,000 refugees returned to Afghanistan from Pakistan in the last 3 months. This figure can hardly be called encouraging. We need greater attention for this, but until then, of course, no matter what happens, we are hosts to the largest refugee population in the world. I conclude by reiterating our support for the objectives and efforts of UNAMA and especially SRSG Mistura. We are confident that the redoubtable people of Afghanistan will overcome all pressing challenges, seize new opportunities for a brighter and prosperous future. Pakistan shall remain the committed and steadfast partner. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Pedro Serrano.
Mr. President, many thanks for giving me the floor to speak on behalf of the European Union. The candidate countries, Turkey, Croatia, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, Montenegro, and Iceland, the countries of the stabilization and association process and potential candidates, Albania, Serbia, and the EFTA country, Norway, member of the European Economic Area, as well as the Republic of Moldova and Georgia, aligned themselves with this declaration. Mr. President, I would like to thank Special Representative Staffan de Mistura for his briefing and the Secretary General for his comprehensive report on the situation in Afghanistan and its implications for international peace and security. Our thanks also go to Ambassador Tanin for his presentation. Mr. President, this month of July marks the start of the transition to Afghan security lead. The European Union welcomes the impending handover of security responsibility from ISAF to Afghan forces in 7 areas of the country. In this context, we are encouraged by the Secretary General's assessment that the performance of these forces has improved as a result of focused training and capacity building efforts. At the same time, we can read that insecurity is on the rise, an indication that the insurgency remains resilient, making transition harder. The figure of 51% more security-related incidents than in the same period in 2010 underscores just how much harder. That is why it is important to recall that the transition process does not signify withdrawal, but a gradual shift to a genuine supportive role, and is not calendar-driven, but conditions-based. By carefully managing the transition, we're slowly but surely fulfilling the wish of the Afghan people to take responsibility for their own security. Creating the conditions for a successful transition throughout the country requires further progress towards good governance and development, as well as on the political track. The stakes for better governance are high, and measures such as improving transparency of and oversight over public finances and fighting corruption therefore deserve high priority. On the one hand, the European Union welcomes positive steps, such as the launch of the Joint Independent Anti-Corruption Monitoring and Evaluation Committee. On the other, we notice that out of all the national priority programs of the Kabul process, the ones dealing with public administration and subnational governance were among the least advanced. This is especially unfortunate since, for several reasons, these programs are also among the most important. As the Secretary General remarks, in the post-transition Afghanistan, with donors working more through the central government, less development funding will flow directly to local authorities. Without a stronger, more reliable connection to the center, without better subnational governance, there is a risk that these provinces and districts will be starved for aid. A more immediate impediment in the area of governance to the disbursement and distribution of development funding is the continuing lack of an agreement with the IMF on the consequences of the Kabul bank collapse. If Afghanistan is to take full responsibility for its own development, and if more development funds are to be channeled through Afghan institutions, something which President Karzai has called an integral part of the transition, then this bank crisis needs to be resolved. This is an issue of great concern for the European Union and its member states, who are jointly spending more than 1 billion euros a year in Afghanistan. Resolving the Kabul bank crisis, and more in general, implementing the governance and other commitments of the Kabul process, such as modernization of the justice sector and electoral reform, require resolving the controversy between the Afghan executive and parliament. The European Union calls for this to be done in a way that is both quick and consistent with the separation of powers. Mr. President, further steps towards more effective and legitimate government institutions are vital for development cooperation, but also for progress on the political track. Better governance would help convince all Afghans that settling differences by force should no longer be an option in the future, and that the political arena should be the only place to fight. In this context, the European Union welcomes the recent decision of the Security Council to split the Al-Qaeda and Taliban sanctions regimes, a decision sure to boost reconciliation and reintegration efforts. On the ground, these Afghan-led efforts benefit from the support of UNAMA, which continues to promote confidence-building measures through advocacy on access to basic services, detainee release, and the protection of civilians. Civilians who, as the report confirms, still bear the brunt of the conflict, with 80 to 90% of the civilian casualties linked to anti-government elements. Not only should reconciliation be Afghan-led, it should also never stray from its fundamental principles: rejection of Al-Qaeda, renunciation of violence, and respect for the Constitution. Securing peace at the cost of international law and inalienable human rights, including women's rights and the rights of religious minorities, would lead to a Pyrrhic victory. This does not amount to some utopian ambition to make Afghanistan a perfect place. It simply amounts to upholding the values this world body, as well as the European Union, was founded on. Mr. President, in the last debate, when its mandate was on the agenda, we spoke extensively about UNAMA. That is why today I will limit myself, in conclusion, to once again expressing the EU's support for its crucial role during the transition, including as co-chair of the Joint Coordination and Monitoring Board, a body in need of further strengthening. We commend Stefan de Mistura and his staff for their commitment and courage, and condemn in the strongest terms attacks perpetrated against UNAMA. The UN is doing important work in Afghanistan for all Afghans, and we strongly support its continued engagement there in the short and in the long term. We count on UNAMA in the new phase ahead, a phase of great opportunity and also great challenges. Nevertheless, as they say in Afghanistan, and I hope this is accurate, there is a path to the top of even the highest mountain. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I thank His Excellency Mr. Pedro Serrano for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Mr. President, let me begin by warmly greeting Ambassador Tanin and Special Representative de Mistura. I would also like to thank the Secretary General for his report and the Special Representative for his insightful briefing. We are grateful for the dedicated and outstanding work UNAMA is carrying out in fulfillment of its mandate under the effective leadership of the SRSG de Mistura in the face of very real and serious threats, which was last evidenced by the attack against the UNAMA compound in Mazar-e Sharif on April 1st. We strongly condemn and deplore this heinous attack and extend once again our condolences to the bereaved families of those who lost their lives, as well as the UNAMA personnel and all the UN family. We also condemn the recent spate of attacks by the insurgents against Afghan targets, which have resulted in an increased loss of innocent civilian lives. These attacks cannot be tolerated, and they will not deter the Afghans and the international community from pursuit of a peaceful, secure, and democratic Afghanistan. Afghanistan is going through a historic period of transformation. The neighbors of Afghanistan, as well as other relevant actors in the region and beyond, should respect Afghanistan's sovereignty and continue their multidimensional contributions towards solidifying it. The transition of security responsibilities and the peace process, as well as economic development, are all at the core of efforts towards realizing the ultimate goal of full Afghan ownership. If one of these processes fails, the overall body of work will also falter. The Afghan leadership of all processes related to Afghanistan is a fundamental principle. Security is a primary enabler that would facilitate development, governance, the rule of law, and institutional capacity building. In the past 6 months, the military operations have reached unprecedented levels. Yet, lasting peace and stability in Afghanistan can only be founded on a political solution. Therefore, necessary time and space must be given to the Afghan peace process when windows of opportunity arise for reconciliation. The prospects for peace in Afghanistan are stronger than ever. And let me underscore that the durability of peace in Afghanistan requires that it encompasses all segments of the society, because enhanced national unity is the single most important basis upon which lasting peace and stability would take hold. While the training of the Afghan National Security Forces is essential in fulfilling transition by the end of 2014, civilian capacity building and economic sustainability are just as important post-2014. We urge all donors to intensify their contributions to civilian capacity development and economic viability. A benign regional order is an indispensable pillar of Afghan peace, sovereignty, development, and prosperity. In turn, Afghanistan's peace, sovereignty, and prosperity would constitute indispensable pillars of the peace and prosperity of its neighborhood. In this regard, we will continue to pursue efforts in support of the regional dimension. At the regional countries meeting hosted by His Excellency Ahmet Davutoğlu, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, in Istanbul on 10 May, which is referenced in the SG's report, the preparations for the Istanbul Conference on Afghanistan, to be held in Istanbul on 2nd November 2011, have been launched. The International Contact Group Regional Cooperation Working Group meetings, held respectively in Istanbul and Kabul on 3 June and 26 June under the co-chairmanship of Turkey and UNAMA, have been useful in eliciting broad support of the region as well as beyond to the upcoming Istanbul Conference. A set of commonalities have already been emerging. The 2002 Kabul Declaration on Good Neighborly Relations was a groundbreaking document. The 2007 Istanbul Statement on Friendship and Cooperation in the Heart of Asia went even beyond